with some disappointment that I say that this is the last of the Fischer games, but in my disappointment, actually no, I'll probably do more Fischer games in the future, especially if you request it. Fischer has white here, and I felt like this was a good game to come to a close with the Fischer chapter of our great game story as we move on to other great players. Karpov. Yes. He didn't play best by test. He didn't do his trademark 1e4. In the World Championship, the most important time in his life, Fischer decides to play something that he basically had never played before against the world champion. And he runs a clinic on how to play one of the classical positions in chess, and this is easily one of the greatest games he ever played. So they transpose into a Queen's Gambit declined. And this is the old main line. And everything's going smoothly. B6. He takes with the knight. And it's just a typical position. And then this is where it starts getting interesting to me. Rook C1. Black's playing solidly still. Queen A4. An interesting move. And the main idea of it is when C5 is played, Queen A3, where we're making this pin on the pawn. So it's going to stay weak. If the pawn pushes, you lose your queen. So he's got to defend. Now we're just keeping him bottled up. A6. Well, that's not really a threat because if the pawn takes our bishop, our queen will take the rook on A8. So the pin is real. Capture. White's king's out of the middle. Now it is a threat to take our bishop, so we move it. Knight D4. This entire game is about different pins. So far, it's interesting. So after Knight D4, if pawn takes, we take the queen. So he protects the queen, making it where he can capture. And Fischer creates this imbalance. We have the same number of pawns, rooks, queen. The major significant difference is the bishop versus the knight. Now, typically in open positions like this one, the bishop is better than the knight if it has targets. Whereas if it's a closed position, the knight is going to be better, especially if the bishop is on the same color as his pawns. Bishop can't move around very effectively. We start with E4. And this is going to secure some squares for our pieces. F4. This is going to be a potential problem when the bishop comes to C4 and we're preparing with the rook support to make some stuff happen. So he's playing prophylactically. He's trying to protect that weak E6 pawn. Fischer's like, you're not going to be able to push it. He's fixing the weakness, turning the screw just a little bit. Where now, that pawn's always going to be stuck on the same color as his bishop, which is why F4 followed by E5 is so powerful. Rook B8. Like I said, there's bishop C4. King H8, getting off of the potential tactics and pin. So now Fischer swaps gears. Queen H3. Notice how everybody's just needling that weakness. Spassky defends with knight F8. No weaknesses, no problems, with a plan. That's everything. So, A6. He lets him get rid of the weakness in order to get this coordination. Queen G3. H4, again, just turning it tighter and tighter because the knight doesn't have any forward squares. Well, what Steinitz said about that, without any forward squares, knight's not very useful. I'm going to go ahead and add my term in there. He's a donkey. So all Spassky can do is defend. E6. Just waiting around for Fischer to do the killing stroke. Queen e5, pinning the pawn, getting the queen on an active square, making sure that pawn can't move, fixing more weaknesses. Spassky's just going back and forth because he can't improve his position. Bishop d3. Lining up the queen and bishop. So if the rook wasn't there, it would be mate. Sacrifice. Bends. And after queen f4, Spassky had enough, because we're threatening taking here as well as rook f8 with devastating effect. Now, this kind of moves from the generation of Fischer, the legend, to the next generation of chess players, but I wanted to take a moment here to talk about the sportsmanship of his opponent, Spassky. Because when this game was played on stage, at the conclusion of the game, like they're up on a stage and then there's an entire audience like that's watching it live, Spassky stands up as soon as the game is done, gives him a literal standing ovation, because he knew Fischer had just played one of the most beautiful games in chess history. Entire audience gives him, round of applause, and you know how much of a sportsman you have to be to lose in a world championship match when you're the world champion. Stand up and give your opponent a round of applause. I've seen people getting in arguments at tournaments over touch move. There's a lot that can be said of the honor of somebody like Spassky doing something like that.